Later today, the National Society of Black Engineers of South Africa is due to meet the Minister of Water Affairs, Lindiwe Sisulu. This is over the issue of the Cuban engineers. The minister has said government will spend 65 million rand on using the engineers from Cuba to help with our water systems. Well, that association, the organisation Solidarity and Herman Mashaba's Action SA are all opposing her move. I understand Solidarity did meet with the minister or the ministry last night. They say they may be able to avert their court action. We'll find out in a moment. Mdumlaba is the president of the National Society of Black Engineers of South Africa. Morne Melan's the head of communication at Solidarity. Gentlemen, good afternoon to you. Mdu, I'm going to start with you. Good afternoon. What's your attitude to this? You also want to meet with the minister over the Cuban engineers.
Good afternoon, Stephen. We met with the minister last week because we're also very unhappy when we found out there were Cuban engineers coming to work in our country. So we met with the minister last week and we expressed our unhappiness, and we wanted to find out from her side what was the decision that motivated her department to bring in the Cuban engineers. The minister then explained the rationale behind it, and she took us to confidence as to why Cuban engineers have been brought into the country. And we are also pleased that she explained herself in saying that she does not undermine local engineers, and also her bringing Cuban engineers in the country does not mean that we do not have the skills locally to deal with the challenges that exist. So given the unemployment rate of engineers in our country, it is indeed a valid concern from the engineering profession, and she has given us the assurance that there will be a lot of jobs that will be created locally for engineers to participate in. So there are ongoing discussions with her department to make sure that our engineers are given an opportunity to make a positive contribution to her department. I think if you look at the whole situation, I think what really caused a big problem was a lack of communication, I think, or communication breakdown rather, between her department and engineers in the country.
Well, I suppose, Mdu, the question becomes, are there engineers in South Africa who are not working? You used the phrase unemployed engineers, so I mean, I don't know if that means that they are. But the question then would become, I mean, would it not be better for the department to use them, some of them, many of them could be your members, rather than spending 65 million rand on Cuban engineers?
Yeah, the minister explained that there are bilateral relationships that exist between Cuba and South Africa, and then there are agreements that the government entered into that they need to honor. So I think what really matters is that in these bilateral agreements that exist between South Africa and Cuba, we need to make sure that it is a win-win situation and it's not just a one-way street. What we also need to bear in mind is that South Africa is not an island. We live in a global space. We also have our local engineers who work overseas. So we do not want to come across as xenophobic when we deal with this matter. So as I said earlier, the minister has given us assurance that there will be, in the next coming months, a lot of jobs that will be created locally, because we all know that in the country we have a lot of challenges relating to water and sanitation. So if you go to Mfuleni municipality, for example, you will see that there are a lot of challenges there in relation to the handling of the sewage. And that's where the minister has promised to take us there so that we can see for ourselves firsthand what the issues are and see how we can help contribute towards solving that issue.
Morne, you represent Solidarity in this conversation. As I understand it, you were also due to meet with I don't know if it was the ministry or the minister herself. How did your meeting go?
Yes, Stephen, we did meet with the ministry last night. The discussions were certainly robust, but I think they were productive. We still believe that there exists no real justification for importing the Cuban engineers, given the fact that there are South Africans with the skills and the willingness to perform these jobs. There are, however, in light of our meeting with the department, two parallel processes currently going on. On the one hand, we still reserve the right to move forward with legal action should we feel it's necessary. That legal action is currently being investigated with the legal team of the ministry. On the other hand, The ministry did request that we grant them some time to present a substantive, formalized proposal from their side to ward off any possible litigation. So we do have those parallel processes running at the moment, and of course, both of them are on the table for us. The current timeline for the proposal from the ministry is on Wednesday, 4:30, so we should have feedback by then.
Monet, I mean, we have problems with water. We've had problems with water for a long time. It requires engineers. It requires people with experience. What's wrong with government going and asking the Cubans when we know that there's a long relationship between our country and Cuba? What's wrong with asking them for a bit of help?
Well, I think that on the one hand, I've already mentioned the fact that there are South African engineers with the skills and the competencies to perform these jobs. And on the other hand, there are serious doubts regarding the actual expertise of these Cuban engineers and of Cuban water infrastructure in general. There are reports that Cuban water infrastructure is amongst the worst in the world, with up to 50% of water being going to waste through leakages, and some parts of Cuba only having access to water for 2 hours per day. So certainly we cannot regard the Cuban water infrastructure as a model for South African water infrastructure. And just to add to that, this isn't the first time that Cuban engineers have been brought in by the Department of Water and Sanitation. In 2015, 34 Cuban engineers were also brought in ostensibly for a similar purpose, and of course it's quite clear that it has not borne fruit in any significant sense. And of course there are bilateral agreements, and we have had similar exchanges with various other countries such as the Netherlands, England, Japan, and numerous other countries. But for most of those occasions there are very tangible benefits in each occasion, whereas past interactions with Cuban engineers have not borne those same fruits.
Mdumlaba, I mean, I realize you're in conversation still with the minister, and you probably wouldn't want to negotiate through the media, and I understand all of that. But I do need to ask you, 65 million rand, would it be cheaper to use South African engineers rather than Cuban engineers? Do you have a view on that, Mr. Mlaba?
Yeah, look, Stephen, I don't want to come across as a spokesperson for the Department of Water and Sanitation as to what, and I don't want to commenting about those figures. So I think the best thing is for them to give an answer to that question.
I mean, I would imagine some of your members might feel a bit aggrieved if they're seeing Cuban engineers being employed at a more expensive rate than they would get paid. And I mean, as I said, I don't want to put you in the corner, but that would possibly be the problem that you yourself, as leader of your organization, would face.
Yeah, we did put that across when we met the minister, that, you know, what they are going to pay the Cuban engineers, our engineers locally will happily accept that as a salary, because, you know, it is quite a substantial amount.
Monet, you say that both your options are open. You could still go to court. How do you see this playing out? You've opened a line, both you and Mdu have opened lines of communication with the ministry. Do you think that this is actually going to be resolved peacefully?
Well, that's our hope at the moment. And like I said, both options are still very much on the table. We don't like to be unnecessarily litigious, and I should commend the department. They have been, thus far in our interactions with them, frank, and they have displayed a level of candor which isn't always present when consulting with government. So I do believe that given, so far as our interactions with them are concerned, they have been open, and we are cautiously optimistic at the moment that court action can be avoided, but if need be, we still reserve the right, and we are more than willing to proceed.
Monet Malan, Head of Communication for Solidarity, and Mdu Mlaba, the President of the National Society of Black Engineers of South Africa. I do appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed, sir.